So good day, friends. This is Dr. Bob Hamilton, and you have tuned in today to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. I appreciate all of you who've tuned into my show today. It means a lot to me because I know that each one of you out there listening, you're busy people. You have a lot going on. You got kids, you got grandkids, you're trying to make ends meet. You're doing all the things that parents do. And the fact that you've tuned into this program means a lot to me. So thank you. If you like what you hear, share it with a friend, share it with your family. We're building an audience. I'm happy to say that. And the reason I'm building an audience is not because of me. It's because the people I bring before you on a weekly basis are remarkable, amazing people. And today is no exception. It is a pleasure to welcome to the Hamilton Review today, Connie Albers. Connie, say hi to everyone.
Hi, Dr. Bob. Hi, everyone. Good to be with you.
And let me tell you who Connie is. First of all, she's an author. She's written an amazing book that we're going to talk about today. The name of the book is called Parenting Beyond the Rules, subtitle Raising Teens with Confidence and Joy. Connie has spent over 30 years in the homeschooling movement. She's a wife, a mother of 5 children. She's what she calls herself a mompreneur. I like to talk about that. And a leader. She's a speaker, has done a lot of keynote speaking around the country on behalf of homeschoolers, and has written this wonderful book called Parenting Beyond the Rules. So Connie Albers, such a pleasure to welcome you to the Hamilton Review.
Thank you for having me on the show. I look forward to our conversation.
So as you may know, I like to have my guests tell a little bit about themselves. We like to hear your backstory, where you're from, the things that motivated you, those moments in time that caused you to go one direction or the other direction. And so, Connie, the microphone belongs to you.
Well, thank you. Yes, Tom and I have been married. We just celebrated our 39th anniversary, so very excited about that. It's a story of pretty much we were told we would never make it, and here we are all these years later. I was from a broken home, like a lot of families, and I started off our journey very much a mompreneur. I was raised to be a career woman, not to get married, not to have children, because that just wasn't going to be satisfactory in life. And so when I did get married and we started having children, I would often look to Tom and like, is this normal? Is this how it's supposed to be? Are the kids going to fight always? So as I started growing, what Tom and I decided to do is create a vision for our family. Like, what was that going to look like? What goals were we shooting for? What were we aiming for when we turned the tassel, when they left the home? And there were 3 things, and I wrote about it in Parenting Beyond the Rules. And it was that our children would love the Lord and not just know about a religion. And they would have a relationship with the Lord, and that they would love Tom and I. They would want to like be with us when we didn't pay for everything, when they were off the payroll. They'd want to go to dinner. They'd want to go to the movies or go on vacation. And that they would want to do life with each other as siblings, that they knew that they were the ones that were going to be there when the times got hard. Friends are great and friends are important, but that there was a special kind of bond being a member of the Albers family. As the kids were growing and we started working with teens, I kept hearing the same thing. Our home was open every week. We would have the kids come to the house. Sometimes it'd be 5, sometimes it would be 60. And we offered 3 things: food, fun, and fellowship. And for a teenager, that like is everything. They're always hungry, they want to have fun, and they love to be with other people.
Right.
And during that time, Dr. Bob, I just kept listening to these kids talk about problems they were having, struggles, and they would share with me, kind of like a stranger, what were their fears and their concerns and their dreams. And I would ask them, why aren't you talking to your parents? And they're like, I can't talk to my parents. And it was interesting because I knew a lot of the parents, and the parents would say, my kids won't talk to me. And as we were like getting ready to turn the tassel on number 5, because we had 5 kids in 7 years.
Amazing. Amazing.
And so I just felt the Lord say, I want you to write a book. And that wasn't something I had aspired to do. Pretty much like everything. I didn't aspire to get married. I didn't aspire to have 5 kids. I didn't aspire to homeschool them. It was like everything, I just kept listening to the Lord, and he'd say, do this. I'm like, I don't know how. You're going to have to do it. And every step of the way, he was faithful in my life to do that, to show me, to bring people into my life that would speak truth into me or mentor me. And so when he said he wanted me to write a book, I thought, that's funny. I have no idea how to write a book. And I said, if you really want this to happen, you are going to have to make it just 100% clear. And he did. He brought an agent and publishers and the whole situation to me. And we knew right away it was going to be about teenagers, because that's where we lose the heart of our kids. That's where
Yeah.
they really start struggling. And I thought, that's where my passion is. I want our families to be strong. I want them to be able to withstand the storms and trials. As a dad, breakdowns can happen, rivalry, resentment, bitterness, anger. And if they leave our home and all they see each other is on a holiday when they're forced to, or a wedding or a funeral, that's such a tragic loss, because our families can be so much more than that. And so that's kind of led into the book that came out, and it's done very well, which led to Focus on the Family. And I do a lot of radio and television, speaking on parenting and education. So that's kind of part of
Yeah.
my story.
Yeah. No, it's a great part of your story. So were you involved in any kind of, like, when you had all these kids over at your home, was that like a spontaneous thing that happened, or were you leading a kids group or a youth group, or I mean, how did that? I mean, you have 5 kids, so you're going to be, by definition, you have a lot of people hanging around. Period, just your family.
Yeah.
But these are other kids who just kind of wandered in. What was going on there?
Well, we would usually have a Bible study once a week, and they were invited to come to any part of it, whether it was coming to the Bible study or coming to hang out or coming for dinner. We had 3 things I cooked: spaghetti, tacos, and I think it was spaghetti, tacos, and I can't remember the third dish.
Probably hamburgers.
I was going to say hamburgers, but it wasn't. It was something with ground beef. I mean, it was like
Okay.
that was the cheapest thing we could do.
Yeah.
And the kids would always, if I said, "Oh, bring something," they'd always bring soda and chips. So that worked out fine. But to be honest with you, it's just, I knew that kids want a community, just like you and I. I mean, we want to be with other people. We are designed for and defined by our relationships.
Sure.
And our kids are not any different than that. So I knew the best way to know what's going on in my kids' lives was to find out what's going on with their friends. And what kind of friends do they have, and do they know how to navigate the subtleties of friendship? And so we would just open our door, and people would say, "Isn't it expensive?" Yes, it is expensive, because they're messy. They don't really supply anything. They're not always great at cleaning up, and things get broken. But that wasn't our goal. Our goal was to forge these relationships. And to be honest with you, Dr. Rob, we've gone to so many weddings and baby showers, and the kids still on social media follow us and comment. There's still a lot of them are my kids' friends. And it waxed and waned. Some kids would come for a month or two, and then college would come along, or something would happen, life would happen.
Sure.
They would get a job. And so there was never a requirement. It was just, "Hey, our home's open. Come."
I love that paradigm. I love that openness to really just kind of reaching out. And I'm sure that your kids were like in the vortex. They were right in the focal point of all this, kind of chaos, actually, but fun chaos and fun joy. A lot of moments. I'm sure that your kids appreciate. Now that they're grown, do they do that? Are they beginning to do the same thing you guys did when you had, when they were in your house?
They do, but not to the same degree, mostly because they don't have a lot of children. When they do have parties and they want to have get-togethers, they usually call us and say, "Hey, can we invite some friends over to your house?" So our house is still like the community house.
Yeah.
But that is what's modeled to them, and they do it on a scale that works with their season of life.
Sure. Sure. No, you have to definitely do that. By the way, that's kind of what our house has become too. Some of our kids too. They go, "Hey, we got to have a party at your house." Okay, no
Yeah.
problem. You can come over. We will make ourselves, we will go for dinner or something, and you guys can take the house. This is wonderful. So you have certainly you lived your book is what you did, and because I can tell that reading your book is very organic, and it talks a lot about things, and I want to kind of get into your book. I'd like to read first of all a little bit of the foreword that was written by a guy named Michael Ferris. Michael Ferris is the CEO and general counsel for Alliance Defending Freedom. They're the legal group. And he has some real kind things to say about you, by the way. He says, Connie Albers, a mother of 5 growing children, has created an excellent compilation of the kind of wisdom that she gained the hard way, successfully raising 5 children through the teen years to adulthood. Start with that. And he goes on to say that successful parenting of a teenager must be focused on building a great relationship with your child. Connie gives important suggestions on how to do this, but her biggest message has 2 important truths embedded in these suggestions and her many encouraging stories. Number 1, he says, if you want a great relationship with your teen, work on winning their heart. We're going to talk about that. That's a very critical thing. And number 2, while what you do will impact that effort, the most important thing you can do to win your child's heart is to make sure that your own heart is right with God and right with your child. So he's really hearkening people to both this idea that we have to be true to the Lord as much as our children. And here is his final comment. He says, win your teen's heart by making sure that God has your heart. That's a challenge. That's a very excellent challenge. So tell us about a teenager's heart, because this is the essence of a lot of your book.
Yes, it really is. It's something that I learned. Our kids are talking to somebody. They want to talk to somebody. And I often encourage parents, I'm like, will it be you? Let it be you. You have the opportunity. You are the primary influence in your child's life, unless you give it away, or you don't take it seriously, or you somehow neglect it, or you're not working diligently to mend offenses or hurts or wounds that we can often inflict when we don't monitor our mouth and we overreact. But at the essence of it all, with keeping your child's heart, it's learning to not overreact when children do childish things. When they, we social media is very unforgiving, and our kids often will do things that they will regret later. And in years past, it would have just been over and done with. But now it can live on in perpetuity online,
Sure.
because people
Yeah.
can screen share it. But I'm going to be honest with you, when I talk about keeping the heart of your child, I talk about being available, being interested, listening to the things that matter to them, the small things. It can be little things, an infraction they have with a best friend, or not getting selected for a team, or it could be a host of things, being confused in the culture of what's going on, like the segment of the focus of your show, where our culture's colliding and parents collide. But we have to be available to listen to our children without overreacting, without marginalizing, mimicking, making fun of. We have to let them know that they matter, that they are heard, and that they have a voice. We
Yeah.
know that they matter. And, so often, as you know, as a dad of 6, our kids get to pick maybe the paint color in their bedroom, but they don't pick the zip code. They don't pick which bedroom they usually get. They don't pick how you're driving anywhere, when you're going anywhere. They don't have a lot of choices. And as our kids start to grow, and I say this in the book, as our teens grow, we have to adjust.
Yeah.
And often parents created all the rules. We create the curfew, we create bedtime, we establish dinner time and breakfast time. And we establish all these, and these are the rules of our house. And we have to have rules. Rules are what governs a society. It's what keeps us from having chaos. But we forget, as mom and dad, we can adjust those. And if I could give you an example, like when our children want to do something and maybe we're not in agreement with it, for whether it's against our family value, whether it's we don't have a good feeling about it, or maybe our child isn't demonstrating the ability to be responsible and make right decisions in the moment, we would always tell our kids, and this is kind of what Mike was referring to, we would always kind of tell our children, listen, you pray about it.
Yeah.
You pray about it. Ask the Lord to change Dad and I's heart. Dad and I are going to keep talking about it. Dad and I are going to pray about it. And I promise you, if God wants you to have that, if he wants you to go to that, party, or get that job, or whatever it is, even having a later curfew, God will make it known to Dad and I. And you know what ended up happening? Their faith grew because they saw God show up in small areas by working through us, their parents.
Sure.
And so then they started realizing, this prayer thing, oh, there's something to it. It's more than just, thank you, God, bedtime prayers. It's powerful and effectual. And God is a God that hears our request, and we can trust him with that. So, and the other part about, you can't pour from an empty pitcher. If we can't teach our children what we don't have, if
Yeah.
we do not know what God's word says about anything, what the principles are,
Yeah.
if we don't know, we can't teach them to our children. As a matter of fact, I sent a group thread, a text the other day to the kids about a family name. It was just something that had come up, and I thought, a family name is really important, and I was just kind of writing about it. And one of my kids wrote back and said, I think what you meant to say was basically your testimony before the Lord, that you raised your kids to have discernment, and da da da. And I'm like, wow, I just got rebuked from my daughter. I didn't mean the way what I was trying to say. She interpreted it and she processed it a different way. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly right. That is what we raised. We wanted you to be able to listen to the Lord and live a life that reflects that in all manners, in all areas of your life. So, I mean, that's a little rabbit trail, but it was funny that this just happened, and your kids grow up and they echo, they talk about that which they saw modeled in their home. So if the Lord is important in the day-to-day of life for mom and dad, your kids are going to take that with them into the next seasons of life, which you probably can attest to.
No, it's so true. And I listen, I could have used your advice probably a lot about 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, when my kids were growing up. But I can tell you that just watching and standing back, and certainly I was one of those fathers who was very, I watched my kids pretty carefully. I was demanding in my own little way. But looking back, and now as they're adults, these are very different people. They have different strengths. They have different interests, completely different interests. The good thing about my kids, they really do love each other in a very deep, 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 wonderful way, which makes me exceedingly happy, honestly. But you're right. I mean, you have to look at when kids are young. Let's be honest. And you had a whole bunch of them. You said 5 under 7. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Is that how you said?
Yeah.
That's a lot of little people running around. Because
a lot of different personalities.
Oh man! And you got you were busy. You were busy, mommy. But that being said, when they're young, you can kind of like you say, you kind of drive them around. You do this, you do that. You put them in the bedrooms. You put them to bed at night. You do all that kind of stuff when they're young. When they get to be teenagers, things change, and I love, listen, reading your book, there's so many wonderful little points that you make in here. One thing you use the word intentional a lot. Tell us a little bit about I know what the word means. I think most people do, but what does that word mean to you, Connie?
It's a deliberate focus on that which matters the most. If you know what you're aiming for, then you can be laser focused and aiming and shooting for that, because parenting it's certainly not a straight shot. It is full of unexpected twists and turns and face plants and pitfalls that you got to dig yourself out of or help your kids work out of. But the intentionality means just exactly that. We knew what we were trying to build in our family. We knew what we were looking to have when they left the home, and that was those relationships that would withstand the trials of life, problems that would happen, losses of children, losing a baby, and all sorts of things that happen in a family. We never lost sight of what the goal was, and that was that we kept their heart, so that they, like in scripture, it talks about the sheep know the sound of their shepherd. We wanted our kids to want to listen to what we had to say. We didn't want to have to drag them, push them, shove them, threaten them. We wanted them to want to consider. So we would always say a couple of things like, will you consider something, especially in the teen years? I have a thought on this. Would you like to hear it?
I'd love
And
to hear.
sometimes they,
Oh,
yeah, sometimes they say
yeah.
no.
Oh, okay.
But anybody, okay, that's fine. Let me know if you want me to speak into that. Otherwise, I'll just listen and you talk to me about what's going on. I want to finish this thought on just the intentionality part above it. So when you put the relationship above, like the rules, above all the other things of getting your room clean, making the bed the right way, getting the dishwasher unloaded, or setting the table properly, when you know where you're going, all the things that don't happen just as you think they're going to happen, you're able to navigate through it because you're protecting the most important thing, and that is their heart, their mind, their spirit, their soul, because they are a person created by God. And I believe it's parents' responsibility to get to know the child that they have. So often we look on social media and we're like, oh man, why can't you be like so-and-so's kid?
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll turn around and say, could you imagine if your child came up to you and say, I wish you could be more like Bobby's mom?
No,
I
no,
would probably want to wring my kids' neck, like, well, go live with Bobby. And they'd like, well, fine. Well, here's a suitcase. We didn't do that. But the point is still, we want our children to hear what we have to say. And when we mess up, and note, that's like, write that down, listeners. When you mess up, when you say something that you wish you hadn't have said, or the way that you said it, or the time that you said it, or the time that you didn't listen because you were really busy, and we can't always be available all the time, but our children have to know we are available, and sometimes we just have to delay things just a bit. When they know that, they're so much more inclined to, one, not resist your instruction, not to rebel against your instruction, and not to tune you out and tune others in.
Yeah.
Because they know that we are for you. We respect you. We trust you. We value you. You are important. You belong in this family. You have a vital role in this family. And if you weren't here, there would be a gaping hole. And there's something, as you know, and as a doctor in pediatrics, kids want to know, oh, I do have worth. I do matter.
Sure.
And my quirkiness or my personality that everybody gets irritated at sometimes, it does matter. I matter as part of this. And Dr. Bob, we'd always say we're the Albers, and this is what we believe in, and this is what we stand for, and this is how we do things. And all of a sudden, it's like, well, there's a sense of pride, not in a bad way, but a sense of connectiveness.
Sure.
So that's what I mean by intentionality about the words that you speak, that they fall into a tender place of your child's heart, because when you speak something, that filter that particular child is going to process what you just said. Because we can say the same words to one child and the exact same tone to another, and one's going to start crying and break down because they feel like you're getting all over them or you're disapproving of them, and the other will be like, no big deal.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. No, it's
so
so true.
we want to phrase the word, we want to construct our sentences and our tone of voice in a way that when we're speaking to that child, the sensitive one, the leader, the risk taker, the one who's very logical and sequential, we want to say those words so that when it goes through that ear canal, that it lands right where we want it to land in our child's heart.
So
Yeah.
Connie,
Does that make sense?
No, it totally makes sense. One thing is that, you talk about having your child's ear, having their heart. There's so much going on right now. There's so many distractions in the world that I don't remember as a kid. as much. I mean, we have these little, iPhones that we walk around with. Here's mine. I'm showing it to you right here. And we all have these things, and the kids have them too, ultimately. How do you maintain, I mean, I'm sure you're not trying to shut the kids out of the world.
Mm-mm.
But how do you maintain, and I'm sure a lot of people have this question, how do you kind of keep them connected to you because of all the voices which are out there kind of wanting to get to their eyes, as they say, they want their eyes. How do you keep them connected to you?
Being available and listening. I mean, so why are these kids talking so much on their devices? Why is it in 1.5 seconds they have to respond to a message or a text? Because they want to be included, they want to be part of. This need to belong is really a compelling driving force. But let's talk about the technology, because that is a huge issue. And parents always ask me when, what age, how long, and what platforms. And having a background in social media, I know it frustrates parents, because my response is always, it depends. It
Yeah,
depends on your child.
sure.
Do you know why they want to be there? Do you know what need they're looking for? Is it somebody that is struggling with insecurity, and they want friends? And let's face it, the last 3 years has really done a number, psychologically and emotionally and mentally, to our children. They're full of anxiety and depression and insecurity. They've lost some of the ability to communicate in real life, in person, and we're trying to play catch up. So your question is, how do we keep them listening to us? It's being available and being engaged in their life. It's not sitting in a room and everybody on their devices on a platform doing something. It's doing things together, and it's talking to them about why this matters. Like, there's a book by Simon Sinek, and it basically talks about the why. Why are we doing what we're doing? Everybody has a why. Your kids want to do something. They want to go somewhere. They want to be friends with somebody. They don't want to talk to you about something. Why? So my encouragement to parents is always figure out what the why is, and then you can address it. If they're not talking to you, why aren't they talking to you? Are they afraid you're going to reject them? Are they afraid you're going to take their phone away, or their life away, or ground them for a month? Are they concerned that you're going to judge them and not forgive them, or look poorly on them because they did something they know they shouldn't have done, or they got themselves in trouble and they're scared? Um, and same with social media. Is it that they just look for somebody to talk to? They just want to feel like
Sure.
they fit in somewhere.
Yeah.
So being available, listening, and monitoring your mouth are keys to keeping your kids' hearts.
There's a couple of things that you mentioned in your book, which I think I'm a big fan of, and that is meals together. You say that you always had a meal together, your dinner time. Um, I happen to be, I've actually done podcasts on meals together, and the importance of having meals. I mean, I think I've said it before on this podcast, but basically people who have regular meals together, their children's they do better academically. They have less deviancy of many kinds, from drugs and sex and alcohol and all sorts of things. Your thoughts tell us about your meals together. What did you do it was obviously a requirement in your family. Did that persist and through junior high school as well?
Yes, and college. I mean, if they weren't in classes, they would usually hurry home, because one, it was a free meal, and they liked it. And two, we learned about what was going on. It was an opportunity. So I wrote about that in the book. Some of the things that are important are no devices. No, even their friends, and give them an opportunity to tell their friends, hey, between this time and this time, I'm not available. And give them words to help them understand. Don't say mom and dad said no, because that makes you the bad guy. Just say, I'm going to be tied up from this time to this time. I'm not available. I'll let you know when we're done. And the kids, and most of the kids will be like, hey, can't talk right now. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
So no devices, no negative talk. Our family kind of speaks sarcasm, and I know some people are not, they're like, oh, never say anything like that. But you have to know the heart of your kids.
sure.
And when they're poking around, or laughing and cutting it up. So that we would talk about successes and failures, like, hey, did something happen today that you just really want to talk about? Or you just want to talk about, the professor, or do you want to talk about what happened in, math class or whatever it was? So it needs to be things that they like, conversations they enjoy talking about, a place that is safe. They know what they share is not going beyond your family. It's not going to your kid, a sibling's BFF, that it's just for us. And we would talk about our trials and our struggles and our wins and our losses. And it changed. So what you do when your kids are little will be different when your kids are in middle school, because they're moody. There's like, I call them the moody, mysterious, marvelous middle school years. And then the high school years become bigger challenges and concerns and fears, like, will I get into college? Am I smart?
Yeah.
So that's what we did. It was consistent. It always mattered. And it didn't matter if it was, hey, takeout, fast food, or home cooked meal. The point was just being gathered around together. And to this day, probably yours are like that too. They don't want to miss it. There's something about FOMO that kicks in, and that fear of missing out. We wanted the fear of missing out and being with the Albers, with us, to outweigh the perceived value they were going to get from, hanging out,
Sure.
talking about whatever with their buddies.
With their
There's a
friends.
place
Yeah.
for it. It wasn't like a dogmatic thing, but it was the overarching theme that we had in our family.
No, it's true, and if you don't cultivate that time together, they will gravitate to their friends. You talk about friends in your book, and this is an important thing. You actually talk about qualities of good friends and qualities of not such good friends. And let me kind of read. I think this is a really good little list. I'd like people to hear it. Okay, what are good friends? What are they like? Their qualities: they're respectful to their parents. They love God. They don't gossip about other friends. They treat their siblings kindly. They apologize for doing wrong. They listen to others. They encourage others to try. Those are the qualities of good friends. Here are the qualities of not such good friends. They disrespect their parents. They have no interest spiritually. They twist the truth. They're easily angered. They need to be right all the time. They blame others for mistakes. They're critical of others. And I read that list and I kind of go, this is a great list of, kind of ideas that we can need to inculcate into our kids in terms of how they choose their friends. Tell us about friends, because friends are really, really critical, especially during the teen years.
And especially during this season, this culture right now, what's right is wrong, what's wrong is right. And if you think opposite, then you're mocked, criticized, maligned, and cut off, canceled. So I wrote that specifically because when you factor in having a home that's open and doing things as a family and inviting others to come along, you really do learn about your kids, and your kids start to see tendencies and characteristics in other people. How do you teach them? You teach them by real life application. I mean, you teach them as you go, as you walk by the way, as you are in basketball or soccer or whatever it is that you're doing. You point those things out, not in a, hey, do you see that kid over there? That kid's really being disrespectful. You just start teaching them like you would handling money, for instance. You learn about real money by handling real money, not by handling fake. So if you teach your children, talk to them about, I noticed this person, your friend, they often kind of like make fun of their mom or their dad, and not in a just kind of jovial way, but they really put them down. They really do disrespect them. Their parents say be home by 10, and they'll sit there and say, oh, it's okay, I can come in at 10:30. That's a disrespecting of the parents. So you teach them those types of things, and then you teach them through observation. Somebody does something on the team, say they're in a sport, and you see somebody get mad. My kids played basketball, and you would see one of the teammates get really mad and slam the ball down. They couldn't control their anger, and you're like, hey, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
How do you see that? So modeling observation and casual conversation from what you see, that during the teen years goes a long way to helping them form and shape those relationships, because our thought was always, Dr. Bob, they're going to leave home And we can't monitor that stuff. And what I would always see is these kids would come to our home, and then when they turned 18, they would just go to berserk because they just didn't have this strong structure of relationships, how to judge, not judgy, but you have to judge character. If
Sure.
somebody is lying, or if they make fun of other friends when they're not around, you say, if they're doing that about so and so,
Them, they're gonna
they're
do it, but
probably doing that about you.
sure.
So what do you think about, and then always engage them, as you taught your children, always ask them, so what do you think about that? Is that the kind of friend you want to be, or the kind of friend you want in your life, that you can trust, that you have respect with? So keep bringing it back to, friends are trustworthy, friends are respectful, friends are believe in each other, they appreciate each other. And just you reaffirm, like the story, like when you're learning about a book and you're learning characters about in certain stories, like the story of Ping. I'll use that one. We probably read that book 100, 200 times. And the reason we did is because our children learn, as you know, I mean, this, but our children learn by repetition.
Sure.
So we have to keep telling them over and over in different ways, so that they start to say, oh, at some point along their point of growing up, it starts to make sense. And you're building those subtle truths in their life day after day, moment after moment, when they seem so insignificant, but they're not. They're meaningful and powerful.
I think what you're saying too, and this is something that, because I want to talk about this a little bit. You're a homeschooling mom, and you were able to spend a lot of time with your kids, which is something that a lot of parents are not able to do. They rue that because they wish that they had more time, but they're working, they're doing this, or they choose. Unfortunately, some people just choose not to be with their kids or with their families in general. But you obviously had a lot of time with your kids, and you were able to those characteristics that you're talking about come through hours and hours and hours of intimate interaction, which is something that I want you to talk about in a second, about this homeschooling thing, because I know this is near and dear to your heart. I do want to talk about one thing before we get to that, though, and that is fear. You have a whole chapter on fear. And my observation is that fear is something that we all have. We all have fears. We fear economic issues. We fear political issues. There's a lot of things we fear. I have found in my life, and as I age, that the things that I have done out of fear, which I have done things, have always been kind of lousy decisions. Um, I'm just curious. You talk about this issue of fear. Kind of take it from there.
Well, I mean, we have to starve the fear. I mean, God tells us in scripture, fear not, for I am with you. I mean, God's with you, and he gave you the children that he gave you. A lot of times we parent out of fear that if we cross them, if we don't give them what they want, if we're not friends, we want to be friends with our kids. If we're not like the hip mom or dad, the cool parents, that our kids will reject us, they'll rebel, they'll and they'll embarrass us, they'll do all the things. And that's why I address fear. We have to starve the fear, because if we starve the fear, then our faith will grow. But if we starve our faith, our fear will grow. And so those go hand in hand. And as we parent, we can't parent from a place of fear, because parenting is hard and we have to make unpopular decisions
Sure.
sometimes.
Yeah.
And, they'll be like, that's not fair. You're right. It isn't fair. But, one day when you look back, you'll understand. And right now you may not, but I'm going to ask you to do something. Again, I bring that subtle of, you matter to me. I'm going to ask you to do something. I need you to trust me on this. I need you to trust me.
Yeah.
I want what's absolutely best for you. So, and our kids do things, Dr. Bob, because they do things and don't tell us, because they're afraid they're going to embarrass us, they're going to disappoint us, that we're going to not love them, that we will cut off love and support, because I can't believe they did that. So I really tried to approach it in the book from 2 points. One, why your kids do things and they may not tell you what they may be thinking. And then what we need to do as a mom and dad, and we just have to trust that those are God's kids. God has a plan and a purpose for them way beyond what you can do. God's going to work through it. You work toward keeping the heart. You work toward the key is communication. So let's talk to our children, explain to them why we're doing what we're doing, and then ask them to trust us and say, this is really important, because we're always going to start from a place of trust. And we'll maintain that, and we'll keep giving you these things until you show that, you couldn't handle it. You weren't able to manage it, or you're not mature enough yet, and we'll revisit it. Does that make sense?
Total sense. And I think that I like the idea of what you say, when you have faith, you chase away fear. When you don't have faith, fear crowds in like a thief.
Takes over.
Last thing I want to talk about real briefly is you're heavily involved with the homeschool movement in this country. You're a keynote speaker. You've been keynote speaking really all over. You said Toronto, Florida, Phoenix. You've been all over the country. Mm-hmm. Speaking about homeschooling, why is homeschooling important? And tell us a little bit in the minutes we have remaining, why people who are thinking about homeschooling should do it.
Well, it used to be back in the day, people thought you were odd and strange if you homeschooled, because they didn't understand it. Who would want to be stuck with their kids all day long? I mean, I even thought that at times. It's like, wow, can I put them on a school bus and see them at 3 or 4? Homeschooling exploding, and now pretty much everyone knows someone who has or is being homeschooled. And so the pandemic kind of ushered that in, when everything was shut down and parents were forced to homeschool their kids. It really wasn't homeschooling. It's what I call pandemic schooling, which is not the same.
Sure.
But since then, what parents have realized is homeschooling offers a certain freedom. It offers a freedom to be able to do things that we as a family deem as important. It allows us to move more rapidly through school subjects that may take an entire year, and we can cover it in 20 days and have the whole year knocked out, because it's the ratio. Like mine was a 1-to-5 ratio. And some things you go slower on. Some things you go toward mastery, not just introduction of a concept. And parents started to realize, wow, this is a tailor-made custom education. And that is the best thing for a student, even if you don't really know what you're doing. Because I had an engineer, and I'd tell you right now, he's probably way smarter than me in a lot of areas. But that didn't keep me from tackling this tough subjects like physics or calculus. I don't need calculus, and you probably do. I didn't need it, and I didn't really need physics, but I knew he needed it. So homeschooling is growing and expanding because parents are seeing the possibilities. And as I say, your children are a masterpiece in the making. And it's our job to create pictures of possibilities for our kids, because we know them. We know what makes them tick, and we know what makes them ticked.
Sure.
And the converse is true. Our kids know when they should ask if they can go out on Friday night, like when's the best time, and probably when they shouldn't ask. So when you realize that your kids are not they're a masterpiece. Masterpiece are not paint by numbers. They're unique. They have different gifts, strengths, and talents. And as a mom and dad, we get to have a front row seat to seeing the beauty that's within, the brilliance that's within. We get to see that explode. And so I often tell parents, your children, especially in the homeschool world, and children in general, children are born expansionists. They live in a world of what if and what's possible. They're adventurers, creators, innovators, risk takers, explorers. That's the way God made all of us. But what happens over time is, no, don't do that. No, don't do that. That won't work. This won't work. You got to do it this way. And we keep saying, no, you got to color inside the lines of the box.
Yeah.
You got to stay within this box. And all that creativity, all that wonder and joy and enthusiasm and love for learning gets squelched, and they become reductionists instead of expansionists. I believe that's why parents are more and more parents by the millions are choosing to homeschool.
No, there is a huge movement. How did your kids now went through college? How did they do? Did they do okay? I mean, they made it to college. Did they I mean, people say, well, the education that you get in homeschooling is not adequate. How did they do?
Actually did great. I was the one that was more afraid than they were. Kids don't know what we don't know. They
Yeah,
all did
that's true.
well. They all went. They all got academic scholarships. They
It's
all went
amazing.
on to college. They all graduated. They're all gainfully employed. We have one of our sons just won an Emmy. Our daughter is currently in Paris doing some photo shoots. Her work's been featured on the cover of magazines. My son's an engineer. I have 5. I won't go through all of them, but when you have the opportunity to see what skills they have, and you help develop those skills, that talent with skills and knowledge, and you keep reminding them, hey, this is possible. This is possible. This is what I see in you. You have this ability to solve these really hard problems, math problems in your mind. I don't know how you do it. I certainly couldn't do it. But, I think you may want to consider this field. Why don't we explore it a little bit? Not pushing, not demanding, or you just have this propensity for telling stories. Have you ever thought about being a screenwriter? Have you ever thought about being a storyteller? And that led to becoming a videographer, and that led to becoming, having his own videography business. And same with my daughter with photography. I kind of had an idea with her when she painted a masterpiece on our wall that was in crayons. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably not the best place. But the next night I took some paper, put a big sheet of paper with painter's tape around it, and called her back into the room. And I'm like, hey, here's your canvas. Have at it. When you're done with that masterpiece, let's roll it up. I'll put it in the corner and we'll put a new canvas on there for you to color.
You're a good mommy, Connie Albers. You really are.
It's just as you know, our children are amazing. We raise the children that God gives us, not the ones we wish we had or our friends' kids. We have to study them. We have to know them. And we have to speak life into them, because the world drains them.
Amen to that. Well, we're going to end on that note. Connie Albers, you're an amazing person, and I can see why you're a keynote speaker, because you speak very, 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 very well and very convincingly and powerfully. Her book, friends, is called Parenting Beyond the Rules, Raising Teens with Confidence and Joy. Connie, I hope we run across each other in real life. We're here Zooming together, but I hope that happens. And thank you for taking the time to be on my show today.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's been a pleasure. So, friends, you have tuned in today to the Hamilton Review. We're finishing off here with Connie Albers. Beautiful book she has written. I encourage you to pick it up. Again, the name is Parenting Beyond the Rules. And Connie, I wish you the very best. And friends, until next time, be well.
You have been listening to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of your day. Tune in again next week on Apple Podcast. Rate and comment and tell a friend.